Henry VIII is most famously known for his 6 wives, and the fact he had 2 of them executed inside the walls of the Tower of London. But his failed love life was driven by his desire and obsession to have a son and a male heir. His 3rd wife, Jane Seymour, would give him this in the form of Edward VI. However, Edward died at a young age and never lived up to his father's dreams of carrying on the Tudor dynasty for centuries. But Henry VIII did have a son that was born some time before Edward. He had an illegitimate son named Henry Fitzroy, born to a mistress, Bessie Blount. Many have considered that Fitzroy may have been considered to have become the next king after Henry VIII, but he too would die young. But there was a legitimate son born to Henry and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, but this child would live a short and tragic life. If history was different, then this child could have saved a lot of bloodshed and executions. But what is the story of the death of Henry, the Duke of Cornwall? Henry VIII married Catherine of Aragon in 1509, and she had previously been married to Henry's brother, Arthur Tudor, who died inside of Ludlow Castle shortly after their wedding. Initially, it was believed that Henry and Catherine's marriage was a happy one, and the king and queen lived rather happily following their coronation. Catherine made a great impression on the people of England, but within a few years of marriage, in 1511, Catherine fell pregnant. Catherine is known in history for the fact she struggled to produce a child, and she had been pregnant once before, shortly after the marriage. On the 31st of January 1510, she gave birth to a stillborn daughter, and she had been told that she was carrying twins. However, following the death of the first daughter, no second child came, and it was said that the royal couple were devastated at the loss of this first child. However, quickly after this, she fell pregnant once again. Catherine went to Richmond Palace for her confinement, where she would be tended to by her closest ladies and companions, along with the royal midwives, who were considered the best in the land. There was much hope, and Henry VIII wished for a son, as he wanted to secure the House of Tudor's line of succession. At Richmond Palace, her room was decorated with rich tapestries containing positive images, and on the 1st of January 1511, the child was born, and it was everything that Catherine and Henry were hoping for. A son was born, and this child was then named Henry after his father, and should have become King Henry IX after the death of his father Henry VIII. It was the child who would have been the heir, but Henry VIII would follow a similar fate to his father Henry VII, in the fact they would both lose their first heirs to the throne early and at a young age. The child Henry was born 18 months after the wedding and the coronation, and he was christened in a huge and lavish ceremony on the 5th of January, 4 days after he was born. He was christened with beacons being lit in his honour, and there were great celebrations across England with bonfires being lit in the streets of London. Henry VIII even ordered the Mayor of London to make sure the people of the English capital were given free wine to toast the health of the prince. Tower Wharf, next to the Tower of London, fired a royal salute, and the midwife was given a cash bonus. The baptism of Henry was witnessed by many ambassadors, and he was given the title the Duke of Cornwall. His godparents were the Archbishops of Canterbury, William Warham, the Earl of Surrey, and the Earl and Countess of Devon. The French king and the daughter of the Holy Roman Emperor even sent very expensive gifts for the child. But after the baptism, the ambassadors visited Catherine of Aragon and gave her best wishes. But she then met up again with her husband, and they left the young prince at the royal nursery, which was set up at Richmond. His parents visited him often, but his daily routine was overseen by his mistress, who had a number of staff members to help her. Raising a royal child required a huge amount of care, especially one who would become the heir to the throne. Henry organised a huge tournament in the honour of the prince's birth, and he issued a challenge to anyone who wished to try their luck against him on the tilt yard. On the 12th of February 1511, a huge and lavish tournament took place in celebration of Henry the Duke of Cornwall. Catherine and her ladies watched in a large enclosure, which was covered in cloth of gold and purple velvet. The initials of Henry and Catherine were intertwined, as were their royal symbols. There was a large pageant cart, and on this were flowers and herbs, and in the centre was a huge golden castle. It was a huge display of wealth and celebration, and the pageant was dominated by jousts, and the king and his men rode under canopies of gold and purple velvet. He was completely besotted at the time with his wife, and the fact they had a son, and it was clear that the image we have of Henry in this monument is not one which we would associate with the notorious Tudor king. Henry seemed settled and overjoyed with his wife and marriage, but later in life he would completely change. Henry received the Challenger's Prize, and there was huge banquets that evening, and the whole court attended. However, 10 days after the incredible celebration, everything would come crashing down for the royal family. Prince Henry, the Duke of Cornwall, at the age of 52 days old, had died inside of the royal nursery. It is not known what killed him, or how he died, or whether he was taken ill for a number of days or not. He may have died from sudden infant death syndrome. However, this was a huge tragedy for the king and queen. Catherine was completely broken, and Henry VIII tried his best to comfort her. They then had to order someone to arrange the burial of the boy prince, and he was buried with honours of a prince. At the time, it was said that the king and queen would not attend the funeral in person, so trusted courtiers had to deal with the ceremony and represent them. It was said that the prince was to be buried in Westminster Abbey, close to where Henry VII had been laid to rest in the Lady Chapel. The tiny coffin was then taken from Richmond Palace down the River Thames, where 3 barges in black took it upriver. Everyone wore black. The official mourners, along with others, carried the coffin, and 6 knights carried banners. There were 180 paupers who were paid to attend and pray for the soul of Prince Henry. The route was lit with wax candles, and prayers were sung as the coffin made its way into Westminster Abbey. The coffin was then received by the monks, and the choir was draped in black, and it was a very solemn procession. The coffin was then lowered into the grave, and Prince Henry, the Duke of Cornwall, was buried on the north side of the sanctuary area, near to the entrance of the chapel of Edward the Confessor. The royal couple believed that they were young enough to have more children, but the death of Prince Henry had a profound effect on them. Henry VIII had lost the male heir that he wished greatly for, and it was the closest Catherine of Aragon came to producing the male heir and successor to the throne of Henry VIII. The king's eye would later be caught by Anne Boleyn, which led to the king's great matter, plunging Catherine and Henry's marriage into great scrutiny, and he would later split from the Roman Catholic Church and the Pope, just so he could be rid of Catherine. She did have a daughter with Henry, who went on to rule England, as Mary I would become known as Bloody Mary during her 5 years on the throne. But the story of the prince, Henry, the Duke of Cornwall, is one that is forgotten, and one that is incredibly tragic and sad. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.